Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 323. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to help support and inspire new trauma workers through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. Thanks so much for joining me today, and here we go. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Very excited to introduce my guest, Angela Englander. Angela, welcome.
Thank you, Guy.
All right, so Angela is a passionate and inspired trauma therapist working in private practice in Ontario, Canada. She began her journey in social services, working with children who'd experienced trauma, struggled with mental illness, and had disabilities. Over time, her career developed, and she increasingly specialized in traumatic stress and the impact trauma has on people's lives. 5 years ago, she began working towards creating her own trauma healing service, Ways to Wellbeing, and she continued to learn, grow, and specialize over time. We'll get more into that as we go on in the conversation here. But Angela, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. Share with our listeners where you're from and where you're calling from, and then let's do it.
So I'm calling from a very small town called Tillsonburg in Ontario. It's a farm town and there's no other really social services in the area. So it's exciting to kind of be doing therapy there and be reaching people who haven't really been able to access the same care before.
And where are you from?
So I'm originally from the same town, Tillsonburg,
Oh, wow.
and then I went and spent a little over a decade in Toronto to specialize and gain my education, and then I kind of came back.
Okay. Now, do you actually live on a farm?
Well, I'm kind of in the house hunting process in the moment, ironically.
Okay.
So I'll probably live in Cambridge, but I will be working in an office on the farm.
Wow, awesome. All right, so let's start out with a quote or a mantra, whatever, a sentence, something kind of to get set the context and to get rolling here. What do you have for us?
One quote I really love is, "She believed she could, so she did." And I got this on a plaque from a job I had, and it's really spoken to me ever since I got it.
Okay, so she believed she could, so she did. All right, so when and how did that become, resonant for you? Share a little bit about that story.
I think it's always been a theme in my life. I just didn't really realize it. And in my life, I found I've had a lot of different obstacles and different barriers to overcome. But one thing that's always stayed with me is my belief. I've always thought, you know what, I can do this. I can, go there. I can heal. I can do the things I want to do. And I really work hard to give that same faith and give that same belief to my clients.
Right. You said you had a lot of obstacles, but even despite those, how did you maintain that belief that you could do it despite those obstacles? I mean, sometimes that's not always easy to do.
No, it's very tricky. I think a big thing for me was I would just look at the different routes my life could go, and I just really, really wanted my life to go a certain way. And I really, in my heart, believed I was meant to be a trauma therapist, and a lot of my experiences were building me up to that experience.
Wow, that's awesome. All right, so let's start off here. We talked a little bit, obviously, about where you're from. The quote kind of set the stage here. But let's hear, the story of how you got into this field. Why trauma? What brought you here? Tell us that story, Angela.
So it was kind of a long route because originally I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I kind of started out doing child and youth work and it was good. And then I got an experience running a family resource center and I realized, no, I need more education. I need to keep going. So I did my BA. And then along the way, I got a job doing crisis on call at a hospital. And it ended up being pretty much trauma therapy. So when someone was in a fire, when they were in a car crash, when they woke up from an overdose, I would be the one called in to start doing the therapy with them and start that kind of process. And that's what made me know I want to be a trauma therapist and I want to do my master's and I want to do that trauma work. Right.
So you've got this job, it's on call, emergency-like or emergency services. And oftentimes, when you go in there, you're seeing one situation, but you said you realized that there was trauma. Talk more about, I guess, number one, how you began to discover wait a minute, yes, there's addiction here, or yes, this particular incident occurred, but there's trauma beyond that. How did that unfold for you?
I think it was a really slow process, but I began to see things that didn't quite make sense with my understanding of the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, the DSM. So I would see people with all these different diagnoses, but then when I would look at them, I would see, okay, they're acting in these weird ways and they have these big emotions and things, but then when you find out more, it makes sense because in their environment, everyone has big emotions and they need to be angry to protect themselves, or they need to have that anxiety, or they need to have those things. And I began to realize this is just adaptive. It's just them trying to survive in their environment.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were doing this particular job, where were you in term? Were you still in school? Was this after school? Where were you in terms of your education and career?
So this job, I started when I started my BA. I started at Sick Kids Hospital, and then halfway through my BA, I actually got a contract position up in Newmarket, working as a children's trauma therapist there. So I continued my specializing there in Newmarket at another trauma center.
Okay. So you're realizing that, wait a minute, there's all this stuff going on, but, behind that, in a sense, there's trauma. Now, you talked a little bit about, your personal challenges. How did that, or to what degree did that impact you personally?
I think it's always been there, but it's kind of like the baseline. It's kind of like, I feel like my experiences, my own healing from trauma has really allowed me to see things in a different way, because I don't see it as just, okay, it's their problem, or, okay, they did this and this and that, or the different, I guess, stigmas that are out there. I can really see, we're all susceptible to trauma. There's no one who's immune from it. And we get this idea in our head like, oh, mental illness, trauma, that's their problem. Mm-hmm. But anyone who has a brain, anyone who has a mind is really susceptible.
Yeah. This just came into my mind. Have you ever been triggered?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I guess a bunch of times. Like when I worked at that trauma center I was telling you about,
yeah.
I worked with this mother, and from the moment she sat down in my office, everything in my body felt like she was abusing her kids. And the way she would describe different things, it just felt so terrible. Like even now it makes me feel kind of weird thinking about it. And it was really, really hard. I had to get a lot of supervision just to feel like I was being present in that space, because I just felt so concerned. And I actually ended up talking to CAS about it.
Mm-hmm. So you felt it. It doesn't sound. Did you later learn that it was true? But this is. I think this brings up a good point, right? Feeling it is one thing, right? Knowing it is a different thing, but that it can impact how you do your work, right?
Oh, absolutely. It has a huge impact. So in this situation, it was kind of a weird situation because it started before I started working there. And it was the mom who'd accused the dad of being abusive to the kids. But along their journey, they realized the mom was really coaching the kids and the mom was appearing abusive. So they had the kids stop therapy and me come in and work with the mom to get just a fresh set of eyes, a fresh person in there working with her. Yeah. And I never found out the full extent of what happened because we had to end therapy because of, I guess, the different things she was showing in the sessions, the different things she was saying. But it really took me back a step, and I was like, wow, why would I have this experience? What is going on here?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that, I think inspires me to do this is to really help new trauma healers, people just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. Because, when I was in training and I was doing a lot of commuting, I was, I remember myself just driving down the freeway for hour and a half each way and just thinking about clients and what I was doing, and I don't know what I'm doing. And how did you manage that? Or maybe to a certain degree, clinicians all manage that still, but the uncertainty, not knowing if it's the quote unquote right thing. How do you deal with that and manage that, Angela?
It's kind of interesting because I think as a therapist, you never quite know if you're doing the right thing. You never quite know what's going to work for each person. And a big thing is, just trying, just seeing how different approaches work, just seeing what happens. I think, too, a really big thing is being self-aware. Because a lot of people will just, I want to do it the way the textbook says, or I want to do it the way I was taught. But we always have to have a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of being able to adapt to our clients' needs. and our own experience in that session.
And was that a process for you that came easily? Was that one that took some doing? I know for myself, it was when I was seeing clients, it wasn't an easy process at all. I felt that I needed to have that validation, okay, this is the way it's supposed to go, and therefore I'm going to try to, implement that. But just as you're saying, well, things don't always unfold that way. What was your experience like?
Well, it's interesting because it's been a real back and forth. I feel like because of my child and youth work and then child and youth care experience prior, a lot of that I brought in. So it was really different. Part of it was, okay, how do I do this technique and how do I do that technique and how do I become a full therapist? But then there was also that kind of seeing the child, seeing the adult's experience when they were young, seeing those things from a different perspective. So I think it's been a real back and forth for me, trying to do it the way the books say and then trying to do it the way I believe in.
Let's talk about an early clinical error, a mistake, whatever you want to call it, missteps, but and how you learn from that. This is one the questions I think that a lot of our listeners learn from, and just to feel like everyone's, not super uber therapist. People make mistakes. Share us one experience of yours, Angela.
I think a huge mistake I made was going beyond my limits and really feeling like I could just keep saying yes and I could do all these things and I could do everything and there wouldn't be an impact to it. There wouldn't be a cost. And I remember I worked at the hospital for 2.5 years, crisis on call. And during some of my experiences, one specifically, I worked with a girl and she'd been in a fire and some of her family members had died in that fire. And I just remember after 3 shifts just feeling like I'd been hit with a brick wall, just feeling like, what is going on? Like, why is this impacting me so much? Why am I feeling so off? And just really having to step back and say, whoa, like I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not meeting my needs the way I need to keep myself working over the long term.
Mm-hmm. So like boundaries, self-care and stuff. I know a lot of times people feel they get to the point where it's almost too late, right? Where they become overwhelmed or completely numbed out. Then they realize that self-care and self-nourishment really is something that needs to be attended to. Did it get to that point where you were just like you said hit the wall or whatever?
In that particular job, no, because I ended up getting another trauma therapist job that was actually a 9-to-5 right at the right time for me. But I had a more recent experience working in a big, huge private hospital, doing all trauma work, mostly first responders and people in the military and things like that. And there, right at the end of the job, I started noticing I was very anxious. I started having nightmares. I started to really be impacted by that experience. And that was a huge flag to me, like, this is not the right fit. I need to be taking a step back and really working in a way that's going to work with my morals and values.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In terms of your own experience or experiences, you talked about challenges and struggles and so forth. Do you think that, I guess, number one, how do those help you? How do you draw from them? And the reason why I ask this is I was recently doing a webinar, and someone asked, one of the attendees typed in a question, what if I've had my own trauma? Can I still do this work? How would you respond to that?
I would say that there's a big stigma saying, oh, if you have trauma, you can't. But I think it's the opposite. I think a lot of clients, they know when you can't connect with them. They know when you're judging them. They know when you're biased, and they know when you don't get it. They know. And when you've had your own experiences, you can see it from a different way. And you can also not only reflect on your work as a therapist, but reflect on your work as a person. And just say, if I was this person who'd just come in and I was struggling with, work-related trauma, I'm struggling with domestic violence, I'm struggling with abuse, whatever it is, what would that be like for me, just as a person, and just really bring yourself as a person in. I think that's so, so important in our work.
Yeah. It just reminds me, and I've talked about this before, but, the most recent job I had was in this clinic. I had worked there for 5 years, and I was working under a licensed clinician. We were assessing and treating kids showing early signs of psychosis. And I remember seeing a particular client, a young kid, and my mom had died. This was about 2 years ago, and I took some time off, but I went back to work maybe after about a week or 8 days, and this client started talking about one of their own family members having passed, and that experience, and just being so like somatically triggered by that, and after that, and then going out, taking time off again after that, but then kind of regrouping, and having had that experience, it just chilled me out and made me approach what the work I was doing, just as you're talking about, as like a real person, just flinging off that clinical hat that I thought I needed to just have so tightly wedged on my head. And it was a very different experience to me, just being a person, being period, right?
Absolutely. And it's very humbling, I think. Trauma and even grief is something that really lets us know we're human. It's very humbling because sometimes we can get so caught up in our heads and say, my accomplishments, my this, my that. But really, we're all humans. That's the baseline. We all have these experiences. And it sounds like you really worked well to kind of cope with that, because it can be really overwhelming.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. It was overwhelming. I mean, of course. And just coming back from that was, you sound like you've realized that too. Was that hard, difficult for you, that process of realizing that?
Not in the same way. And I think a big part of my journey is I didn't really have a choice. I didn't really have the choice whether I wanted to kind of push it away and not deal with it and not acknowledge it, because it's always been there. And maybe it's just how I perceive myself, but I don't believe that I could go through my job, or I could go through the work I do and not bring in just something that lets people know that I've had these experiences. I don't know what it is, but maybe just something. Does that make sense?
It does. Excuse me. It does. So it sounds to me like the door's open, right? Not that you're just unethically and without boundaries sharing your life experiences, but allowing yourself to be who you are and be willing to share who you are. That's very powerful.
Absolutely. And I feel like some things don't need to be said. Like a lot of the things don't need to be said, but people can still feel them and sense them. When they come into your office, when they come into your space, so much speaks about you. So much speaks about what your experience is, even without you saying a word about you.
I'm just thinking about our listeners, and again, the people starting out on this journey of becoming trauma informed, and that's so powerful. Just even the smallest details are powerful and can speak volumes. This idea of being willing to, share bits about yourself ethically and responsibly. And I feel I always have to, say that when I'm speaking like this, because I don't want people to misinterpret what I'm saying. But that is so powerful, and it resonates so much with my own experience and being with therapists. In my own experience with my own therapies. Let's talk about maybe some advice you would have for people just starting out on this trauma-informed journey. Maybe, people have had some experience as therapists or as social workers or as counselors, but they're just starting out to become trauma-informed. What would you say to them, Angela?
I would say believe in yourself first and foremost, because there are going to be people that say you can't do it. There are going to be people that say you've done something wrong, and there are going to be a lot of other people, especially professionals, that say, why trauma? That's so risky. That's so dangerous. And the reality is, if you believe in it, if you really want to do it, you'll find a way to keep yourself safe, to do the self-care you need, and you will make it work. And you don't need to listen to the advice of everyone around you, because they don't know your journey.
And how did you, or how do you take care of yourself?
Oh man, a big thing is just really, really setting my limits. Really, really saying, okay, these are the times I'm going to see people, and then after that, I'm going to have a meal, I'm going to go out for a walk, I'm going to spend time with people I care about, and really not overextending it. And also giving myself permission to say no. I went through a phase where I would say yes to everyone, and then I ended up having these really, really long days, and I thought, it just doesn't work. You aren't meant to be doing everything all the time. You're meant to be doing what's healthy for you, and then you can refer to other people if it's too many people or if it's not the right fit, and that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. When you say yes, you mean saying yes to seeing clients?
Yes, so yes to working those late hours when your boss says, "Oh, can you stay another hour? Or can you work some holidays? Or can you pick up a few more people? Or can you just do this report or that report right away?" There's always going to be something, and you can say yes, 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 and you can do it all, and you'll end up in 6 months very exhausted.
Mm. Now, I know, throughout this conversation, there's been a lot of like kind of gold nuggets and that you've shared. And also you may have even answered this question, but I want to ask it in a more direct way. What would you say, Angela, is kind of your, kind of personal, quote unquote, superpower as a trauma healer, as a trauma therapist? What do you think really allows you, allows you to do this work as effectively as you are?
Oh man, I'm going to have to say just really believing that it's my purpose, like really believing I'm meant to do this, even though there's a lot of obstacles. And I think that belief is just what's gotten me through, because a lot of people have said, no, you can't do this. No, this isn't for you, and set up obstacles. And the only reason I'm here now doing this is because I just believed in myself and believed this is what I was meant to do.
I mean, and I think that is just such a powerful message to give to someone who's been impacted by trauma, right? That hope, that message of hope and empowerment. I love that. All right. How about some go-to book recommendations? Actually, before you do that, I just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Angela Englander, and her website is Ways to Wellbeing. That's WAYS, Ways to Wellbeing. I'm going to have that listed up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. How about a couple of go-to book recommendations? What do you have?
My favorite is It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallin. And it's just an excellent book that really speaks to intergenerational trauma and how we can carry things down that happened to our parents, that happened to our grandparents, and the larger impact of trauma.
Okay. Didn't Start With You, How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. Mark Wallin, again, previous podcast guest. And I think you said you had another one as well?
Yes, I do. It's The Body Remembers by Babette Rothschild. And I think even the title is so powerful, because we think, oh, trauma, mental illness, whatever, it's in our head. But the reality is it's all in our system. We have senses, we have feelings, we have, stomach aches or headaches or body sensations or all these things that tell our story, that share our experiences.
The Body Remembers, The Psychophysiology of Trauma and Trauma Treatment. Again, Babette Rothschild. We'll have all these linked up at the show notes page here. So your site, Ways to Wellbeing, and the work you're doing here, how did this come about? How did it come about that, you know what, I'm going to start my own thing? How did that start?
Well, it's kind of a funny story, because one of my electives in my BA was new venture startup. And so I was talking to some other girls I knew, and one of them said, Angela, probably buying a house and starting a trauma center right away isn't realistic, but what if you start a website and just to kind of start from there and start very gradually? And so we designed it together almost 6 years ago now, and we've just kind of went with it ever since. And then she kind of decided to step out, and now it's kind of been my project ever since.
Well, so, and the goal is what? To work with a particular population, or talk a little bit more about what the goals of the work is?
So my goal, I would say, is to work with whoever wants to work with me in healing their trauma. I wouldn't say I work with one population specifically, just because I want to be really careful not to see all kinds of clients with the same kind of struggle and then be really impacted by it. But I really work with, how has the trauma impacted you? What is that like in your life? How can we really work with that and support that to allow people to heal the way that's right for them?
Awesome. All right. And what's the best way that people can get in contact with you?
If they want to get in contact with me, they can email me, Angela@ways2wellbeing.ca. and I will usually get back to them within 24 hours.
That sounds awesome. All right, Angela, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I appreciate you being open and sharing your experiences. It's been great.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
CPTSDfoundation.org provides daily recovery support, live group calls, 365 days a year. All calls are led by trauma-informed advocates, authors, and highly respected practitioners in the field of trauma recovery. CPTSDfoundation.org helps survivors connect with others who've walked through the fire of abuse and are on a path toward healing. After working with thousands of survivors all around the world, they know how to help you escape the shame of abuse by connecting with like-minded individuals so you can finally feel like healing is possible. Stop isolating between therapy appointments. Getting re-traumatized with your current strategy is no longer necessary. Reach out to CPTSD Foundation today and discover the life-changing, daily, trauma-informed peer support you've been waiting for. That's CPTSDfoundation.org.